Thank you everyone for joining us today for our first session of the TI Codes Club. We hope you're as excited for the 2022 TI Codes contest as we are. And this year we will be instituting this TI Codes Club to support and guide you as to how to approach this year's contest, as well as to discuss how you can combine coding, design, engineering, and Texas Instruments technology. We will be meeting every Tuesday at this same time slot during the opening round of the contest, and the last session of which will be the 5th of April. My name is Emily, and I will be your host this afternoon. Myself and my colleagues at Texas Instruments have been hard at work to bring you the second annual TI Codes contest. I was involved in helping launch the first Australian contest back in 2020, and this year I have taken a step up and will be your point of call if you have any questions about the competition. If you'd like, you can reach me at the email listed here on your screen if you'd have any questions throughout any stage of the contest. I'm joined today by Brian Lannon, who has been a classroom teacher for over 30 years and now runs his own consultancy business. As well as being a T-Cubed mentor, Brian is returning as one of the judges for the 2022 TI Codes contest. So thank you, Brian, for taking the time to be with us today and to share your insight.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, I'm happy to be involved with this again. Great. Good afternoon to everyone.
All right. So in today's inaugural TI Codes Club session, we're going to be looking at an overview of the TI Codes contest, including the different rounds involved as well as the key dates. We'll be unpacking the two important documents associated with completing round one, which are the reference guide and project plan. And if you have not yet downloaded these, there is a link in the chat where you can do this. We will also be covering resources to help you get started, how you can go about eventually submitting your pitch, as well as a brief outline of what's to come for the TI Codes Club. The best way to stay informed about the contest is through our social media and e-newsletter. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at TI Calculators AU. And you're also able to sign up for our e-newsletter via this link, or you can scan the QR code and you'll receive reminders about the contest key dates, as well as links to helpful resources, and you'll also be the first to know about any new programs and offers from Texas Instruments Australia. And just as a reminder, if you do have any questions throughout the session, please type these into the chat function at the bottom right-hand side of your screen and address them to all panelists, so that way Brian and I can both see these and ensure they're answered for you. Also, all TI Codes Club meetings will be recorded, including this session. So if you are ever not able to attend one of the interactive live sessions, the recording will be made available to you on demand or through our YouTube channel. So if you weren't involved in the first contest that we held in 2020, you're probably wondering what the TI Codes contest is, what's involved with participating, and what steps you need to take to enter. And so these are all questions we will be answering today. So the contest itself is centered around a challenge posed to students. And this year's challenge is to design a solution that automates or optimizes a process or product related to health, wellness, or medicine. And from there, then use coding and Texas Instruments technology to build a model of that solution. And so the contest is completely free to enter, and all required materials will be supplied by TI Australia. And then it's also important to note that the teacher mentors, as well as the students, don't need to have any prior experience in coding or STEM to be able to participate. Instead, this competition is actually designed to challenge and encourage students to develop their coding and STEM problem-solving skills. We will discuss a little later on in the session the coding resources we have available to assist students in learning programming skills necessary to successfully completing the competition. So now that you know what the challenge is for this year's contest, it's time to gather your team. So to be able to participate, a team needs to be made up of 2 to 4 students aged 13 to 17 from years 8 to 11. Each team needs a teacher mentor whose role is to guide and advise the students on a plan or an approach to the challenge, but they don't necessarily need to teach the students any coding, nor do they need to have a background with using TI technology. All right, so let's move on to the structure of the contest and what's actually involved in competing in the competition. So round one is dedicated to specifically planning and designing your solution. So entries to the contest are actually open as of right now, and they will close on Friday, the 8th of April. And so by this deadline, you will need to have formed your team, come up with your creative solution, and complete the project plan document, as well as create a team profile using the entry form. Brian will be discussing both of these in further detail a little later on. And then after the opening round is complete, there'll be a period of judging. And from here, 15 teams will be selected to advance to the second round. Round two involves building your model, so building the model to your solution, and all of the required materials will be supplied to you by Texas Instruments. Once this model has been complete, you are then to create a video, so no longer than 2 minutes in length, and it's to feature and explain your model, and then to also make a case for why you should win the grand prize. The deadline for this round is the 1st of June, which gives teams approximately 8 weeks to construct the model and to film the video submission. Judging will then take place to select 5 teams advancing to the final round, who will have their videos featured on the contest webpage for public voting. Voting will be open for 1 week from the 6th to the 13th of June, and the team who receives the most public votes will win the grand prize, which we have pictured here. And so the grand prize consists of 3 TI Innovator rovers, 3 TI Innovator hubs, and 3 TI graphing calculators of your choice for the winning school, as well as graphing calculator of choice, medal and certificate for each team member, which includes the teacher mentor. The other finalists, so i.e. the teams who finish 2nd to 5th, will receive a graphing calculator of choice, medal and certificate for each team member, and then each team member of the 15 teams to advance to the second round will receive a Generation STEM t-shirt. Okay, so now that we've had a look at the overview of the contest as a whole, let's focus back on the first round. So as I mentioned before, this round is all about coming up with your creative idea and designing the solution to the problem that you've selected. To be able to do that successfully, you need to know what materials you have at your disposal and also the criteria in which you're going to be judged on. And that's where the reference guide becomes important. So on page 2, there's a table of contents, but once we get to page 3, this covers the equipment that you are required to use in your solution. So no matter what health, wellness, or medical related problem you're solving, your design needs to include one of these 3 graphing calculators, as well as the TI Innovator Hub. So this is because the code that the students will write will have to be written on one of the graphing calculators, and then when the calculator is connected to the TI Innovator Hub, the code that was written controls the hub, as well as any sensors or modules that are connected to it. And because of this, these 2 components are central to the design of the solution the students will come up with. And so then from here, we also have optional use materials. So this includes any input or output modules. So for example, our light sensors or temperature sensors that can connect to the TI Innovator Hub, but they are optional in use. So it really depends on what type of problem you're solving, which will depend on which modules that you choose. You'll also have access to a TI Innovator rover, which is our programmable robotic vehicle, so you are not necessarily limited to a stationary solution. You'll also receive up to $50 allowance to purchase any additional materials which are not contained within the supply kit that teams who are advancing to round 2 receive. So all the materials listed on this page, as well as this one, will be supplied to the teams advancing to the second round. They'll also all be explained in far greater detail in following TI Codes Club sessions, but it is important to consider what equipment is available to you when you are planning your pitch, so that when the solution that you're designing uses TI technology appropriately, and it also makes the solution viable. And so the next aspect of the reference guide is the grading rubric. And this is specifically just for round one, but these listed here are the criteria the teams will be judged on. Excuse me. And this should be continually referred to as you're working through your project plan document, so that you know you're on the right track when it comes to what's expected of you and your round one submission. You know you can dedicate your time effectively to each criteria and make sure that you're ticking them off before you then submit your pitch. The grading rubric itself is divided into two sections. So the first being the description of the problem, which accounts for 25%, and then the second, which is the description of the solution, which is the remaining 75%. And so selecting an interesting problem which inspires you to compete in this year's contest, as well as researching the issue and how it relates to the theme of this year's contest, which again is health, wellness and medicine. And being able to clearly communicate this problem is integral to, well, firstly, how you go about designing your solution, but will also help you meet, obviously, the first three criteria listed here. And as I mentioned before, becoming familiar with the equipment which is available to you to model your solution is greatly important, especially to this criteria here, as it makes up 20% of your overall mark, and it can really greatly depend on how viable your solution is. Also, knowledge about TI technology and how the different equipment communicate and work together will also contribute to how effective your solution diagram is, as well as the efficacy of the program which controls your solution. So if you combine all of the criteria that I just listed, those three, that's 45% of your overall mark. So researching and learning how the equipment and hardware work together, and then also being enthusiastic about learning the code, will go a really long way for your team to be successful in the first round. Now remember, only the top 15 teams will progress past this opening round, so the teams that utilise this rubric and know how to maximise the points with each criteria are at a distinct advantage over the teams that don't consult the rubric at all. Now, so we're going to look at some of the resources to help you get started with coding as well as brainstorming your pitch. And so page 7 is a very important page of this reference guide. So importantly, if you haven't had any prior coding experience, you'll probably find it quite beneficial to start out with our 10 minutes of code activities. So that's listed here, and that brings you to this page. And so you are able to work through these units with your chosen technology and build your coding skills. So you can work through the skill builders, and then there's also an application section at the end of each unit where you can test and apply the skills that you've learnt. So you'll start off with some more basic programming, but then you'll move on to things like conditional statements and loops, which you'll find very helpful when it comes to coding for your solution. We also have a 10 minutes of code associated with the TI Innovator Hub. So that link there takes you here. And this will become a very important resource for those selecting TI-nspire for their chosen technology. So even for those that do have prior coding experience, as the TI Innovator Hub is required within your model and your solution, understanding how coding of the TI Innovator Hub works and how it connects to the hardware and how you can control that is very crucial. Also later in this course, we also have units on how to make rover move and using rover sensors. So if you do want to use the robotic vehicle within your solution, you can also have a look through those as well. We also have a playlist of videos here that align with the TI-nspire and TI Innovator Hub, the activities in this section that I just described. So you can work through those together, and to access these, that's just the first link within the reference guide here. So to get yourself and your students started with coding, they can access the trial version of our TI-nspire software through our website. So if you just go to education.ti.com/Australia, that'll take you to our homepage. And you can access the software by going to Downloads, then All Software, OS and Apps. And if that loads, there we go. You'll find the links to the nspire software here and then the nspire CAS software. So, sorry, I should come back here. And another important link that you'll need to compete in the contest is the contest landing page. And so if you go back to our homepage, you can access that by going to our TI Codes contest here and then clicking Learn More. And here you'll find information about this year's challenge. So that's stated again for your students, reiterates the grand prize, as well as gives you information on each of the rounds. You can download the design packet again, and Brian will go into further detail about this later, but you can enter the contest via this link here. If you also scroll down to the very bottom, it will take you to a link to the finalists videos for the 2020 contest. And just lastly, we also have TI graphing calculator guidebooks, as well as the Innovator Hub and Rover e-guides here. And then if you scroll to the last page, there's also diagrams of the input and outputs for the Innovator Hub. So that'll be really important when the students get to drawing the schematic in their project plan document, which I will now hand over to Brian so he can discuss in further detail.
Thanks, Emily. I think that that document, that reference guide, is just so rich in the material that's within it, but also the material that it links to, those links to videos and courses that are there. And I think the success of a team in this competition is really going to be dependent upon how effectively they use particularly that document, that reference guide. But as you transfer over to me, I will demonstrate or walk people through the other document that you download from that page. So Emily, if you could transfer the presentation rights, I will share my screen. Thank you. And I'll also, because as Emily mentioned, I was a judge in the last time we ran this competition, I'm quite happy to also share a few insider tips here for you club members today, club members and mentors. I say club members and mentors because I'm aware that it's probably teachers who have signed into this, but this club goes for 5 weeks and leads up to before your submission deadline. You see it there, Friday the 8th of April. So we finish on is it Tuesday the 5th, and so that's leading you through some of the helpful tips and ideas to developing the first part of this. Okay, so I'll take you through that, but also just reflecting and some tips from my experience as a judge. What do you do now? So if you've looked through the project plan and the reference guide, and Emily showed you where to obtain those, what's some tips to get started? Well, you've got to complete the forms, and part of that, of course, is your team name. Have a bit of fun. Of course, that the main aim of this is that it's educational, but we hope that you have a bit of fun along the way as well. So a cool team name, get together with your mates and have a meeting. Think of what sorts of things. So this initial meeting would be a bit of a brainstorming meeting to think of what do you think there may be a need in the area of our theme, health, wellness and medicine, and how could you perhaps build something that, or invent something that might be a help to solving the problem that you've identified, and why indeed have you identified that problem. So the other key part, going back into that reference guide, if you're going to go about your solution, what resources are you going to use? And I'll show you in the project plan how you have to identify that. But step one, I think, is that reference guide before you can actually complete the project plan. You do need to do additional research into the field that you've selected. You might be looking to invent something that's already been invented, or what is already out there. So do some research there. You'll also have to research such things as the sensors and actuators, how you're going to gather data, how are you going to go about the coding, select your programming language, whether it be Python or TI Basic. And I'm going to tell you a little bit later about what the previous winners did to win. But before that, let's just take a look at walking you through this key document, the project plan document. So if you've decided that you would like to enter this year's competition, then this is one of the two things that you would need to complete for round one. So round one is the pitch. You don't actually build anything in round one. Basically, you're presenting your idea, and if you are good enough to make the cut, then you'll be sent some equipment and invited to actually build your idea, or build a proof of concept to then go into the next stage. And as Emily said, ultimately we will have 15 teams that will go through to the final, which is then by public voting. You'll be making a short video, and it's by public voting and the judges to decide which is the best solution of what's being built. Here's the engineering design flow. Now, this is something that I think is very much worth following and guiding your discussions. Our next meeting in the Codes Club will be going through this process. So that's next Tuesday. So this document, download it, fill it in. Now, this is a PDF. You may have the capacity to add text into a PDF. If not, print it out, just write it in. You can handwrite, you can type. If you prefer, you can simply write into a Word document and then save it as a PDF, question 1, question 2, etc. There is a later part of this where you will be asked to also submit a diagram. But for the first question, okay, consider the theme. That's health, wellness, and medicine. And where's the problem? What is it you're going to address? For example, you might want to do something that addresses sanitation or assists with sanitation. Why? Why did you choose it? Well, if in that case, it might be because of the current heightened awareness, and emphasis on communicable disease and the ongoing need to address that. Alternatively, you might have something to do with diet. Justify your decision by telling us why you think diet is important. You might alternatively be designing some sort of an air filter. Why is that important? A fitness machine. Why is that important? So that's some ideas for pitching your idea. Question 1. Question 2. Okay, how did you learn about the problem? This is an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you have done wider research. It's not just what's on the page here. So how has your team gone about appropriately gathering a wider field of information and considering a need that you could possibly reduce by the development of some type of tech solution? Question 3, okay, describe your solution, what the project actually does. It's important here to use that engineering design process that I showed at the top of page 1 of this document. And again, a reminder that next week's Codes Club will be specifically focusing on that. My tips on this for question 3, I think you should specifically consider the input, process, and output flow for any machine. Okay, at input, first of all, I'll say the process. The processing is something that will be done by the coding on one of the TI calculators. Okay, so that's processing and control. So that's the brains or the thinking part of your machine. But in order for it to work with that, it will need information. So input means what goes into your machine. What data do you need to select? That your device will need. What sensors will you use to gain that data? So input, process, output. At the output stage, what will your device physically do? Okay, and it will output and do something by way of the actuators. By that I mean motors, light, sound, whatever, or it could just be outputting numerical text or text to the calculator display. Okay, question 4, describe how you will use TI technology in your project. Well, which calculator are you going to choose as the central processing unit? Which sensors will you use? Which actuators will you use? And of course, using that reference guide is something to familiarize yourself with what are the possibilities there. Remember, what you're building is not a full-blown device. We're not expecting you to build a nuclear power station or whatever. You're showing a model that demonstrates proof of concept. So, for example, if your device needs to make a decision based upon, for example, a particular light level, then you need to be able to show that you can harness that information from a light sensor, that you can show the code to collect that data and then make some decision with it, and then based on that decision perform some sort of actuation. If you're using, for example, Rover, well, Rover has on board both sensors and actuators. And actually the Innovator Hub itself also, it has a light sensor on board, and also on board it has LEDs, it has multicolor LEDs, it has a sound speaker, that sort of stuff. Okay. Question 5 here, the listing of the materials. Now, again, that closely examine the sensors and actuators that you'll be using. There are other TI things such as the transistors, MOSFET, and breadboard. Again, refer to the reference guide. You can also use other stuff that you might already have at your school. For example, you might have other motors or other probes, other sensors and actuators that you can tie in with this equipment. Additional to that, remember you've got $50 to spend on other stuff. You might, for example, need a box to put the project in. You might want to buy some additional switches, cogs, levers, etc. Okay, how is all this going to tie in? Well, again, part of your round 1 submission, this project plan, we're looking for a diagram. And you can do some sort of schematic if you like. You can, you don't have to have graphics of these things, but if you do wish to do so, you can download these from the web, and tie them together. Basically, a schematic design. Think input, process, output for this. Make sure you include the TI Innovator Hub because that will be critical. Okay. When you submit this, I suggest you scan it and save it as a JPEG or convert to PDF. And this part needs to be emailed in. Okay. The part here, explain how your team will work together and identify roles. Again, utilize the expertise of what you've got in your group. For example, you might have someone with particular coding skills, so you might have 2 or 3 main coders. You might have others to do the building or the engineering design. So you think of the acronym STEM. You may have different team members that have the expertise for each of those areas. Also, if you're doing additional research, how will you allocate different parts of the research to the team so that not everyone is having to research everything? Now, there's two things that you submit, as I said. There's this completed document or answers to those questions typed out onto, say, a Word document and then saved. Email that. So it has to be emailed to this address here, Codes Contest AU, Australia, at list.ti.com. Now, in the subject line, make sure you put 2022 TI codes underscore, and then remember that cool team name you came up with, okay? Attach to that email this completed document or answers to it thereof, and make sure you also have that included in that the diagram schematic, question 6. Now, so that's one thing that you email. The other is the actual contest entry form. Now, clicking here, and also from that page that Emily showed you, this is the online form to fill in. So you type this in, your team, that cool team name, school name, the teacher mentor, email address, etc., your members. Here's a summary of the pitch idea. So basically that's going to come out of question 1 from the other document, and obviously do the click on these. This one here is very important, okay? Now, if you are a robot, you're not allowed to enter, okay? Because clearly you would have an unfair advantage. However, if you know how to design a robot, yeah, well, then that's who we're looking for. That would be good. But please don't design a robot that's capable of completing this form, because look, that would just confuse everyone, wouldn't it? Okay, you're thinking, good on you, Mr. Lannon. You're just being silly. I promised to let you know a little bit about, from my judging experience, why the previous winners, in fact, won the deal. Their pitch was relevant, creative, viable, and they communicated it well. So that's round 1. Then the model appropriately used the TI technology, specifically by use of the coding. And remember, it's a proof of concept solution. Again, to see how you're getting on, refer to that grading rubric. And at the last stage, a catchy video that harnessed the popular vote. As a judge, I will be voting in that, but of course it's also put up on the web for all, the whole world to vote on if they wish. So that's how that goes. Just quickly, and we do have some international people in this event today, by the way. What's in our later sessions for Codes Club? Well, you've joined us today for the Getting Started. Next week, as I indicated, our engineering design process. Then the third week, we'll be focusing on the coding language. There are 2 languages at your disposal, that is TI Basic or Python. And then the 4th session will be on the selection of the hardware that collects data, i.e. the sensors, and then the final one on the 5th of April, selecting the hardware that responds to data, that is the actuators. And that will be 3 days before round 1 is due for submission. Emily, I'm going to hand back to you, so I shall stop my share here. And I'm not sure how many questions we may have. I can see we have got some questions in the chat there.
Thank you for that, Brian. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, now's the time to ask. Just have a look through the chat.
Oh, some comments there on the 10 minutes of coding being a valuable resource just in its own right. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely it is. And it is very important, especially when it comes to completing your pitch, obviously for the students needing to know how to code, it is the TI Codes contest. So knowing at least the basics of coding is very important.
Oh, here's
We've
one.
had
I'm just
Sorry,
seeing
you go,
here.
Brian.
Yeah, someone's asked, can one teacher mentor more than one team?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely
yeah.
they can.
And do I need to be a STEM guru to be a mentor? Do I need to be an expert on this already?
No, absolutely not. So no coding or even really STEM experience is required to be a teacher mentor. Really, your job as mentor is to guide the students in their approach to the contest and how they, start brainstorming their ideas. But really, it's in the students' hands to, take on coding, do the research themselves. You don't need to actually teach them how to code or really anything about STEM. Your job is just to guide them.
Yep. So I'm hoping we've answered that one for who posted that. Someone else saying that they don't already have TI technology at their school, or their students aren't using TI calculators. Is that a concern?
No. So as I mentioned before, there is the 30-day trial of the software that the students can start coding with, and obviously use the reference guide as well as the project plan document to have a look at what equipment will be available to you. But round one of the contest doesn't actually involve building anything. It's just about coming up with a pitch. It's mainly about the idea that you have. It's not until round two where you actually do build the model, and if you do make it to round two, all of the equipment that you need will be sent out to your school.
Right. Yeah, I think that in itself serves as a strong motivation for doing well in round one. Give me all this great equipment to play with. Yes.
Yes. So we have another question here, which says, we are a rural school with little resources. Do we stand a chance? Absolutely. It's really all about the idea that your students can have. And as I said before, all of the resources and all the materials, if you do make it to round two, are sent out to you, meaning all of the schools are really on an even playing field in terms of that technology. You don't need anything additional to be able to compete in the contest. Everything that you need is sent out to you.
Right. I'm just thinking, this isn't actually in as a question, but do you need to attend Codes Club in order to go in the competition? And I know that the answer to that is no. However, I can't help but think that attending Codes Club to type in your questions, or at the very least, viewing the recordings from Codes Club, that would have to be very helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
We, as Brian did mention, that we are going through the engineering process as well as going into depth about the hardware that's used. And that is especially important in designing the model and then in the end making that model. So knowing what they do and making sure that you choose those wisely is very important. So watching that one live or the two last TI Codes clubs will be very important, but not essential to competing in the competition.
Terrific. Well, I can tell you, Emily, I for one I will definitely be at next week's Codes Club for the engineering process.
Yes. All right, so Brian and I will stick around for another couple of minutes if anyone else has any other questions. But thank you all for joining us today. Next week's Codes Club is on Tuesday. So as I said before, it's the same time slot at 3:45 Eastern Daylight Time, Tuesday the 15th of March. So we hope to see you all there.
Very good. All the best. Good afternoon to everyone.